Dive deep into the realm of the unexplained. Paranormal M is your window to a universe filled with paranormal activity and supernatural occurrences. Don't miss out on our fascinating content. Subscribe and hit the notification bell today. Glimpses of the future. Sometimes when I'm not focusing on anything or just zoning out, I get a first-person perspective look at the environment. Like me standing in a certain place while a certain thing is happening. It's not like I'm actually there, I just see it in my mind's eye. I don't think anything of it until days later when I find myself in the exact position I envisioned before, with the exact same thing happening. It's an intense feeling of déjà vu, because I'm a skeptic. I don't write any of the images that I get down, because there's plenty of them that don't come true right away. And then I think that maybe I'm just thinking of common environments and then I go there. But when the thing I envisioned happens, I can always tell. It's more than déjà vu. It's like getting chills or sense of being unnerved. Why do I feel this way if I'm not even convinced what's happening is real? Sometimes I can remember exactly when I envisioned it, and sometimes I just get the unnerving feeling, and I know that I must have seen it at some point, even if I've forgotten when. The strange part about this is that I talked to my biological mother about it years ago, and she says the exact same thing happens to her. I haven't brought it up since then, but I'm going to. Unexplainable noises. For the past 3 days, I've been sleeping in my car at night. I want to get used to it for when I travel around the States. And I've been noticing strange noises happening in the right side of my driver of my car. Without the noises even happening, I've been feeling unsafe, as if my life is at risk. I think that fear is linked to me feeling a little bit vulnerable sleeping inside of a vehicle in a large town. I'm sure the quote-unquote van life folk felt that for a little bit too. At around 5 in the morning, I would hear 2 human footsteps on gravel. I've been sleeping in parking lots where no gravel is present. Weird, but whatever. And now at around 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. for the past 2 days, I've heard the sound of a van door open, click into a locking mechanism, and 1 foot step on gravel. The sound of that is incredibly close and happened on the described side of the vehicle, the driver's side. When this first happened, I shot up and looked around to find not even a single vehicle or a person next to my car, and the parking lot empty. Last night, I parked near a campground called Lincoln Beach Campground. It's right next to Utah Lake. I parked the right side of the car next to a thick wooden fence, not thinking anything about it. I parked close enough to where you could even be able to open the passenger door at the halfway mark without hitting the fence. At about 6:37 a.m., I heard the exact same van door open, click into the locking mechanism, and the foot step onto the gravel sound. This time it sounded strangely drawn out. The continuous sound of a single foot stepping on the gravel was trippy, to say the least. Honestly, the sound itself made no sense. Once again, on the right side of the driver's seat, I froze in fear because obviously nobody could be parked there. Slowly peeking my head up to investigate, I saw nothing but the wood fence next to me. This isn't the first time I've heard unexplainable noises coming specifically from the right side of the driver's seat inside my vehicle. My last post on this subreddit mentioned that I heard a deep growl of a beast from the exact same side of my vehicle. I wonder if something's been following me. What are your thoughts on this? My grandfather's experiences. My grandfather told me that when he was a young boy, about 8 or 10, him and his brother were playing in this old shell of a car that they had sitting next to their trailer on their farm. He said the car still had its seats and the steering wheel, but other than that, it was just a hunk of metal. Anyways, he said that they were sitting in it playing when all of a sudden they both got sleepy and fell asleep. When he woke up, he said that they, him and his brother, were looking down on the earth. And he asked the people where they were going, and they told him. 3 planets from behind the moon. He said he woke up back in the car next to his brother, and they looked at each other, and my grandpa said that he asked his brother if they had the same dream, and he shook his head, yes, with wide eyes. But after that, his brother would only deny it in front of other people, so we never shared the story again, until that one night when I said I believe in aliens. After that happened to him, he's seen things and experienced things from that day on through. Up until about 10 years ago, when he said that they told him goodbye. That's another story. He was probably 66 or 70 years old then. If anyone would like to make more posts about other stories that he's told me, and the things that he's experienced, there's even been many times in his life where he should have died. I always told people that I believe I'm part alien because I think my grandfather is. Blonde girl with a hat. This is something that happened to me when I was in school. I was playing with my friends when I caught the feeling of someone watching me. It was a big break, so many kids were running around, playing catch me if you can, and all those kinds of things. And suddenly I see this girl leaning on one of the walls of our school building. She just stood there and stared at me with this evil expression. Although she looked very weird, she seemed to be older than me and had shoulder-long blonde hair. It looked thin and damaged. She also wore a black hat. You know, one like magicians pull out the bunnies from. She was completely wearing black and had a cloak on that was black outside and red inside. She had her arms spread away from her body, like if her body would form a crucifix. I froze and stared back, confused from her weird appearance and behavior. Then she said, "What the fuck are you looking at?" She said it in such an aggressive tone that I looked away and tried to act like I didn't hear it. At this point, I was kind of scared at her and not sure really what to do, you know? She was still looking at me, watching me. When I blinked, she moved 1 meter from the spot she was standing before. I was so scared at this point, and then I saw how she made side steps, slowly moving to the door of the building that she was leaning on. She literally moved sideways, her bag touching the wall the whole time. Then she was gone. I thought to myself that it was stupid to react like I did. I should have confronted her. But she was so fucking scary. All the other kids were ignoring her. Nobody talked to her or gave her attention. I searched her directly after she disappeared, but I couldn't find her. I remember my friend also saw her, but it's been about 10 years, and we have no contact. I even did contact her some time ago, but she couldn't remember it. It's just a stupid feeling when something like this happens and you know it happened, but nobody seemed to care, and the only person that could prove my point doesn't remember it. I feel lost thinking about it, and I have no logical explanation. Since I was young, I could always tell if something is real or just fantasy. I recorded something strange with night vision in my house earlier this month. Had a couple of small and strange occurrences follow after that. About a month ago, I purchased a camera recorder for my PVS-14, the ANVRS MK3. I own a few night vision devices and I wanted to be able to record while I go shooting at night. The night after it came into the mail, I clicked it onto my PVS-14 and tested it out in the house to see whether or not it was working. I started walking around my house, shining around my infrared light and the laser. I heard a noise behind me while I was walking into the hallway to the bedrooms. It sounded like it came from the sink. When I turned around, I saw nothing and kept goofing around. You can see shortly after this that I walk up to the kitchen and look at the sink, and it was still curious. I was still hearing this noise maybe, but nothing was there. It wasn't until checking the recording that I saw that there was a white figure standing by the sink when I turned around. In fact, you can see something crouched over the sink when I looked from the living room to the hallway shortly before. Important to note that the recorder is low quality, but I could see everything in that kitchen crystal clear when I turned around, and I didn't see anything odd. The light and the laser was not on when I turned around. I did have an infrared LED on the back of my helmet, and my best guess is that it's a reflection of some kind. Only issue with that theory is that I've tried to recreate it multiple times with the same conditions, and I've been unsuccessful. The house is relatively new, built in 1984, and while the owners that built the house recently passed away, they didn't die in the home. The following night, I was home alone, and an empty can fell over on the countertop and rolled into the sink while I was on the other side of the house. The second I heard it hit the countertop, the hair on my neck stood up. I knew for a fact that can was sitting level on a flat surface with no open windows or source of a breeze. A week after recording this, my girlfriend gave me a call while I was at work. She said she felt like somebody was in the house. She said she couldn't explain why other than that she heard a loud clicking occasionally. I told her it was probably the thermostat kicking in and that I'd be home soon. My girlfriend woke me up the next morning wondering why I left the scissors in the middle of the floor downstairs in the den. I told her I know for a fact that I left them at the chopping block in the kitchen before I went to work the day prior. She said that she hadn't been downstairs in a couple of days. We're the only two in the house. Our house is a bi-level, and we mostly live upstairs. The downstairs has a bedroom, bathroom, and a den for guests. She was freaked out since she heard clicking the night before. Haven't had anything weird happen in the 3 weeks since. Link to video and a side-by-side comparison of the kitchen in the video versus how it looked a few hours later when the sun came up. The only editing I did, other than shortening the video and repeating the section in slow-mo, at the end was the cutting of the sound levels because the recorder's right in front of my nose. All you could hear was me breathing. I did turn it up to normal levels when I turn around. If you listen closely, you can hear the noise I heard. The time and date stamp is also incorrect. I'm unsure of how to change it so the recording stopped displaying it incorrectly. Thank you very much, Gecko. For years, I've been experiencing paranormal stuff. I think I'm finally starting to piece it together. My earliest memory was when I was 5 or 6 years old. My brother and I shared a room and our bed faced the hallway. Our door was always open, since me and my brother were young, and I remember waking up and seeing a woman's finger. She had long painted black nails. Keep this in mind. For years, I had been having a reoccurring dream where I would be running away from her. I would eventually make it to an alleyway, and there would be an older guy with a doctor's coat yelling, It'll be okay, come here. He would manage to capture her and restrain her in the hospital bed. Who is this her? I don't know much about her, but before the dream started, I'd gotten a very realistic dream. It felt as if it was actually happening. She was sitting on one of the dining room chairs with a doll on her lap that looked just like her. She had messy black hair, white-laced gown, a veil, pale skin, and the exact black nails I saw a few years back. Please hang with me on this. This isn't the craziest part. In that dream, I couldn't speak. Remember that. I would see her in different forms, mostly as a doll, or her quote-unquote human form. I would see her everywhere. It didn't matter where I moved. She would appear in hallways, in my bathroom. There would be nights that I would hear talking. It sounded like two people talking in gibberish. After 10 years of this, I finally told my parents about it. My mom prayed over and in my room. Later that night, my mom had a dream of her. She looked at my mom from on top of her bed, then grabbed her legs and dragged her to my room. My mom tried rebuking the demons, but guess what? She couldn't speak. I asked my mom for more details on how she looked because I didn't fully believe her. She told me she had a veil on, something I didn't tell her. But she said that the veil was covering her face. But with me, she had it up. I don't know why she had it up with me. I don't know why she's so persistent watching me. After that incident, it stopped, but I still sometimes feel as if someone is watching me. My experience with the paranormal. Okay, so I just thought I'd put this out there. Not really even as a warning, but more as a way to share information with individuals that could possibly go down a similar path to me, with the wrong mindset, and possibly make the same mistakes I did. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural and the paranormal, ever since I was a child, and my obsession began after reading the Darren Shan books. Anyway, that's beside the point. So when I went to uni, I started getting into a lot of occult reading. I went to uni in central London, and there's a bookstore, and it goes by Watkins. Anyway, I would spend many weekends there perusing the different occult books and the artifacts that they sold. Often they were very expansive, but I'd gotten a student loan and had some money to spare and to play with. Eventually, after many months, having read a number of occult books, I decided to get a Ouija board. Yeah, I'm a fool. So, after a couple of weeks, my girlfriend and I are just chilling in my uni room. We've had a little bit to drink, but not too much. I decided to bring out the Ouija board and see what she thinks. Needless to say, she was initially skeptical and apprehensive, which made sense. She has a family history of extremely proportions with the paranormal, but that's not my story to tell. Eventually, we nut up and decide to try. At first, nothing really happens. We ask silly questions, and I try to scare her a couple of times, as one does. So eventually, we start to relax more, and it turns into more of a game than a true experience, trying to contact the other side, in our minds at least. I decide my ignorance to call out to an entity while we're using it, Azazel, a name I'd read about in some of the occult books aforementioned. My girlfriend looked at me strangely, as at this point, I'm kind of just losing it calling out to this entity. Thinking back, I'm not really sure what compelled me. I shit you not, my curtains start to close really slowly by themselves, and my wardrobe starts opening and closing. To say we both shut ourselves, or I'm guessing he meant to write shit, to say we both shit ourselves would be an understatement. We ran out of there. We get a coffee and talk about it, but even at that point, we're semi-laughing about it. Probably read too many books or something. Became desensitized, I don't know. I walk my girl to her dorm and go back to mine to sleep. That night, I have the most intense dream of my life, and let me tell you, it was a nightmare. I don't really feel like going into details right now, as I get severe anxiety when I visualize it too much. But basically, it was of hell, torture, and suffering. Years later, I've never touched anything to do with the occult since, other than protect myself against contact from entities that wish to do me harm. To say that the dream I experienced that night scared me would be putting it nicely. Seeing smoky shadows in my garden. Okay, so I live with my grandparents. As they have a small house, I sleep downstairs in the living room, which overlooks the garden through a pair of large sliding doors. I've been a smoker for years now, and will often find myself sitting outside late at night having a smoke. The strangeness began almost a month ago. So as I'm sitting watching some videos on my phone while having a late night smoke, I start to get a really bad headache. In my head, I'm assuming that I've just been on my phone too long, so I decided to switch for some music instead. As I'm listening, and about done with my smoke and ready to get up, I see a strange sort of black smoke figure near a conservatory at the end of my garden. I look at it for a while wondering what it could be. Or if maybe my mind is too addled from the lack of sleep and I've began hallucinating. Anyway, eventually I convinced myself that it's nothing and just go inside to sleep. Nothing happens until maybe 2 weeks later when the same thing happens. This time I use the torch on my phone to light up the area, but I can't seem to see anything. Once I shine my torch on it. So I get up, and in the same black, some figure in the gloom. Its head was angled towards me. To be honest, I was really scared. I felt like maybe everything I believed to be true about the world was wrong. Just to clarify, I'm a really skeptical person by nature, preferring to lead sort of on my assumption that the observable cannot influence us, even if some strange entities may exist. So yeah, I was in shock. I eventually gathered the courage to run inside, but I don't know. I've seen it from those big window doors twice since, and it's freaking me out. I feel like it's watching me. Creepy treehouse. A couple of nights ago, my friend and I spontaneously decided to go smoke really late into the night, like 2 a.m. Our new spot is his girlfriend's treehouse, which we've only gone to a few times, and it isn't too deep in the woods. It was an ice-cold night, so the leaves on the ground were frozen, leaving a loud crunch with every step we took. This will be important. We get to the treehouse and tried lighting the lighter, but it was out, so my friend left to go to his girlfriend's house to get a new one, which is only like a few 100 feet away. He left me alone, which I had no problem with at the time. I was able to hear him walk into the distance due to the loud crunches, and I decided to just go on my phone to pass the time. About a minute in, I heard more clearer than ever footsteps that just seemed to appear right underneath the treehouse and started walking around. For a second, I assumed it was my friend, but he had just left and there was no way that he'd be back already. I also realized that with the ground being frozen, I should have been able to hear his footsteps coming from far away, way ahead of time. As all this was going through my head, I heard the footsteps walk toward the bottom of the ladder and just stop. I completely froze and avoided moving, so that whatever was below me wouldn't hear me. I texted my friend hoping that he left his girlfriend's house and he was just messing with me, to which he responded that he was still over there. I told him what happened and to hurry back, but he didn't take me very seriously. Luckily, I had a cinder block right next to me, ready to throw at whatever was about to come up the ladder. A few minutes go by and I didn't hear the footsteps again. Of course, I heard my friend's footsteps coming from at least 50 feet away coming back. I just decided to completely forget about what happened, and we went on with our sesh. A little bit spooked out, though. Shadow people influencing my father's dreams. At the time, we were living on the ground floor of a small block of a 2-story unit. It was in the morning. My mother and I were sitting down watching the television, which was against the wall. Behind us on the right was my parents' bedroom. And to the right in front of us was the front door, and besides that, a window. I recall we were watching the TV when in the corner of my eye I saw movement. As I turned my head to see what was moving, I could see humanoid shapes speedily walking and maybe running into my parents' room. As if he walked in, through the window I'd guess, though perhaps it was the door, and just went into the bedroom, not through their doorway but straight through the wall, as the crow flies. I turned to face my mother and she was looking at the same thing. We were both surprised. I ran into their room to see what was there. It was just my father laying down, fast asleep on the bed. So I returned back to the TV, thinking about what I had just seen, and about half an hour later or so, my father gets up saying that he had a dream, that an ancestor of ours came to speak with him. He recounted the strange dream that he had, and the person he was speaking to. I recall him outlining how the man he spoke to was dressed in his dream. I'll leave that out for privacy's sake, though. Now, looking back, I can't recall what the message my father received was, but my mother told him then that both of us had seen a shadow figure walk straight into the room not a while before he got up. He didn't seem too shocked. I'd later learn that it was not uncommon for this family. Ghost finger through the bathroom window. This event took place in 2020, around the end of the year, when I was in the shower living with my mom in an apartment building. Now, the bathroom has a small window just above the toilet, which saw into the lobby, which, if open, had a decent view of anyone in the shower. So naturally, we would usually have the window down almost completely. Now, this window is also frosted glass, so you can make out a figure on the other side, but with no great detail. Over this window was a fly wire netting with a small hole in it around the bottom about an inch or two from the window. Now, for reference, this hole is not big at all. It's tiny, but it is there. So one day I'm showering, window less than an inch open as usual, and then in the corner of my eye, a long, somewhat pale finger began to extend through the small gap I left open in the window. At this point, I'm just kind of too shocked to move, like a deer in headlights, but my mind was racing. I thought there was some creep trying to open the window or someone trying to scare me. I recalled the small hole in the fly wire net. So I was about to shout something out at this person. Based on the size of the finger, I thought it was a guy. Until I realized that this didn't add up. You could force fit your finger through the hole somewhat, sure. You would be scratching yourself on the exposed metal wire, though. But after the wire is a solid 1 to 2 inches of space before the window opening, and with the amount of finger I was seeing, nearly to the start of the proximal phalanx, meaning that I could see past the knuckle. I was astonished that someone had a finger so long and that it could fit in the small gap between the window and the wire net. Thing was, I know everybody who shares my lobby. All the people on my floor were of Vietnamese or African descent. And there were few Caucasian people on the other levels, none of whom had such an abnormally long index finger. It was then that the finger began beckoning me. It folded up, like the gesture you would use to motion someone to come forward. At this point, I'm starting to entertain the idea that this is not a human being doing this. But the nail in the coffin for me was the fact that despite the finger gesturing for me to come forward, I could see no figure on the other side of the frosted window, no silhouette of a person whatsoever. A few seconds later, the finger retracts back through the window. And that was that. No sounds, no movements through the glass window. I got out of the shower immediately, went outside, no signs of anyone. Interested to see anyone's thoughts on this strange event. Something kind of strange happened to me a few years ago. I was living in an apartment townhouse with 2 other roommates. Both roommates were gone for a couple of days because it was Thanksgiving. They were spending it with family at each of their respective hometowns. I had the house to myself for 3 to 4 days. On the second night alone, I decided to make myself some macaroni in the kitchen around 1 a.m. So I'm stirring the noodles in the pot, and out of nowhere, I become very, very terrified and fearful. I felt something, and some kind of fear of being watched, but I can't explain what this was. I looked over my shoulder almost to expect someone standing there, but there was nothing. I was trying to calm myself down, because there was nothing, but I couldn't shake this absolute terror and fear. I felt it climaxing and rising up in me. It was rising and rising, and the hair stood on my arms and neck, and I felt close to a complete panic, and then pop! All the lights went out. It was pitch black, total darkness, and the stove turned off, and I became so terrified that I ran out of the kitchen with no shoes or a coat. I ran out into the parking lot and felt like I was in a horror movie. There wasn't anyone for me to go, or there wasn't anywhere for me to go. I don't know my neighbors, and it's 1 a.m. My feet were freezing, as it was November, and after some time, I didn't know what to do but just calm down in the parking lot. I couldn't just not go back to my home, so eventually I just got brave enough and went back in. I found my phone and used it for a light. I called someone and told them how scared I was, but nothing could really be done. They didn't live near me. I eventually went to sleep and woke up with the lights working again and the soggy noodles on the stove. It just really freaked me out that my hair stood up, and I about had a panic attack before the breakers seemed to switch or whatever happened with the electricity. Could be nothing, I guess, but seems strange that I felt absolute terror, like another sense came to me where I felt extremely unsafe. I had a really strange encounter with a woman at an antique store, and I don't remember a thing. This happened to me a few days ago, and I have no idea what to make of it. I have no one that I can comfortably talk to about this for answers, so I'm posting it here because I hope someone will take me seriously. I'm new to this community, so let me know if this breaks any rules somehow, and I'll adjust the post accordingly. Me and my friend, we'll call her Naomi, went to an antique store a few days ago. And as soon as we get inside, she says something feels off. She can't figure out what it is, but there's just a general feeling that something isn't right. Quote-unquote gut feelings aren't something that I really believe in, so I just told her everything was probably fine and we continued into the store. Naomi kept looking over her shoulder the whole time. Not in a frightened way, but more like she had her guard up and was on the lookout for anything that could go wrong. Whether that be a bookshelf falling over or somebody having a heart attack. She says she's psychic for that kind of thing, but again, I'm a big skeptic. There is one thing I find strange, though. I keep seeing someone out of the corner of my eye. I always notice them just a split second before they leave my line of sight behind another shelf or around another corner. You know when you think you see a shadow right at the edge of your vision, but nothing's there when you look? It was that exact sensation, but I know someone was there, and it wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't necessarily threatening yet, but still a tiny bit curious. Here's where things get weird. Naomi and I are pretty good at sticking together, and we go to shops like that, but we occasionally do go off in different directions. Normally, we'll at least give each other a heads up if we're splitting off to different sections, but at some point, I turned around and she was just gone. No warning or anything. Initially, I thought it wasn't a big deal because I figured that she'd turn up sometime. So I'm by myself in the back part of the store, and it's full of candles and astrology-themed stuff. I thought I was alone. But when I went to leave that section, there's some woman standing right behind me. Immediately, I just got a weird vibe from her, and I was super uncomfortable, like she was standing just a little bit too close to me than a normal person would. I stepped out of the way because I thought she was trying to get past me, but she just got even closer, put me on edge enough that I started to hold my keys between my knuckles. Before I could tell her to back off, I had the sensation that I was falling asleep. Everything in my brain just started going fuzzy, and it was getting harder to think. Next thing I know, I hear Naomi saying my name over and over, and I wake up, still standing in the exact same spot. The woman wasn't there anymore. I asked Naomi what happened, and she said that she'd been trying to get my attention for 2 minutes. Apparently, I had just been staring blankly ahead as if I was hypnotized or something. I remember none of those few minutes. It's all completely gone, like I was literally asleep, standing up with my eyes open. I asked if she'd seen the woman. She just got this serious look on her face and asked me, "Did she say anything to you?" I said I didn't hear her voice, but I was also a bit unaware of everything for a few minutes, so I just said that I don't remember. Naomi took my hand and walked us straight out of the store, and she wouldn't let me talk to her about it anymore. She was really freaked out to the point that she even checked the back seat of her car before we got back, like she was making sure nobody was hiding. She barely spoke the whole drive back. She dropped me off at home, and since then, we've only texted, but she'll change the subject every time I try to bring up what happened in the store. And she'll do everything she can to talk me out of going back like my life depended on it or something. I've been left without answers for this really weird encounter, and I needed to tell someone about it. If not for answers, then just for someone else to hear it and take me seriously. I know how it all sounds, and I'm pretty sure most people in my life would just think I'm crazy or something. I know I would assume my friend was crazy if they said the same thing to me. In terms of theories, I have nothing good. I don't think the woman drugged me because I can't find anything online about any drug that just incapacitates a person for 2 or 3 minutes before instantly wearing off. When I regained awareness, it wasn't like a gradual thing. It was like Naomi flipped a light switch. I don't think any drugs can do that without other side effects. The other thing I thought of was that maybe it couldn't have actually been some sort of hypnosis, but I'm pretty sure that also can't make any sense. From what I gather, it seems like somebody had to consent to being hypnotized for it to work. You can't just go up to a random person and hypnotize them without warning. And maybe this is just me being cocky, but I feel like I'd be pretty difficult to hypnotize anyway. Just to be clear, I don't take any drugs and I don't drink. I don't even use over-the-counter cold medicine when I feel sick. I typically just let everything heal by itself. Also, I have no history of mental illness besides what some people in the family think is an undiagnosed case of OCD. If anyone has any ideas, even if they're really quote-unquote out there, I'm willing to at least hear them. Again, I know how this all sounds, and even if you don't believe me, I appreciate people reading the whole thing. My daughter seems to be able to sense death. So my daughter, who's almost 13, has always seemed to have this kind of thing that she would do when impending doom was near. The first instance was when my grandfather was sickly. He had prostate cancer. Anyway, one morning we were over there helping my grandmother out. My daughter was probably 5 or 6 at the time, and we were just standing around talking, and I was talking to my granddaddy, and all of a sudden she comes up to me and taps me and says, "Mama, can I get in the bed with Granddaddy?" I really didn't want her to because I was afraid that she'd kick him by mistake or something. But he was like, "Yeah, you can get up here, baby." She got on the bed and had this very weird, almost sad look on her face. I didn't think anything of it. So fast forward a week later, my granddaddy died. The next one, I sort of had to keep my friend baby girl. Sorry, the text is confusing. The next one was, I had to keep my friend's baby girl here while she worked, and later that day my daughter made it home from school, and me and the baby were laying in the bed. I was like 5 months pregnant. So she came and stood on the side of my bed rubbing the back of her hair, and she had the exact same look of sadness on her face as when my granddaddy did. But I didn't think to put the 2 and 2 together just yet. So she goes, "Mama, can I get in bed with the baby?" I said yes, and she laid down beside him, and she had a sad look all over her face. Well, the next week, the baby was dead from SIDS. This next incident involves my grandma. She was sick and I was feeding her, and she couldn't hardly talk, but she wanted to see my kids, so my daughter got up to her and looked at her face, and she had the same sadness from the last 2 times. Then the next day, my grandma was dead. The Rotten Woman. Back when I was in my late teens, I moved out of my hometown. I then rented a room from some couple. The woman didn't work, but her partner did, so she had lots of time on her hands, and she tried to control everything in the house, including me. I was working 2 jobs while studying. The woman, who literally has no life besides from trying to mess up other people's lives, started doing weird stuff. I woke up to find her watching me sleep. She stole my sunglasses, killed my fish, all in the name of being a cunt. She tried bossing me around and just trolling, though she would disappear every full moon to apparently get nude and dance with her coven in the mountains. She claimed to be a witch. Despite my interest in spirituality and tarot, I don't believe in witches or witchcraft. I think the spells work on a belief system that causes a domino effect of either positive or negative things occurring. Anyway, I decided that I'd had enough of tolerating her bullshit and I just moved out. That resulted in her stalking me by turning up at my workplaces and staring at me for hours. I reported her to the police, and then she tried to cyberstalk me by Facebook and phoning me 1,000,000 times. After moving into a new place, I would wake up in the night to see something standing in the corner of my room, yet whenever I got up or turned the light on, it disappeared. Hence, I assumed I was dreaming. Eventually, it started standing at the foot of my bed, but again, whenever I tried to get up or turn on the light, it would vanish. One night, I woke up to just this thing standing there like usual, but this time I could see a creepy woman's face on it. It was smiling at me. I said, "Fuck off," and it vanished. For a while, I didn't see the thing, but I started coming up with scratches all over my body. I had no idea where they had come from, and I would find them on my arms, my chest, my hips, and thighs. One night I woke up and ran to the bathroom mirror because I thought maybe I would find the thing that bit me, to find scratches all over my shoulder and back like someone just clawed me. I checked my bed for anything that could possibly scratch me and even visited a doctor who asked me if I was self-harming. I wasn't, and I couldn't figure out where these scratches were coming from. The last incident occurred one night when I was half asleep and rolled over to my side. I felt air on my face, and I originally ignored it until I felt a big gust of air directly into my face. I opened my eyes to come face to face with this rotten, bloated, dead-looking woman. She looked wet like someone killed her and then left her in some water to rot. Her body was coming out from underneath the bed while her head was propped up near my face. I actually screamed and I was too scared to get off the bed. I covered my face with the blankets and then started saying prayers and waited until the morning. After that, it never came back and the scratches healed. It scares me to think about, but I do wonder if it lived under my bed for a period of time and was scratching me from underneath. As to where it came from, again, I don't believe in spells, but whatever it was wanted to pose as a female, and I think it a part of my loser ex-housemate, like a malevolent manifestation of spite. The Spirit Tree. When I lived in Florida, around Jupiter, we had Juneau and a Marcinski beach. My whole life I grew up on this beach, and at night some strange things have happened. From UFOs to apparitions, I've always felt a strong natural spirit here. Later in my teenage years, I was often kicked out of my house, anywhere from weeks to months at a time. I lived on these beaches. Most specifically, I kind of always stayed at Shower 39. Shower 39 was the heaviest I felt this natural spirit. I even saw what I dubbed a beach demon there in the trees. 2 of my other friends saw this and still talk about it. Still, for whatever reason, I felt safe here and comfortable, sleeping below the shifting canopies of the sea grape forest. The way the beaches are laid out is there's a sidewalk, then a long stretch of sea grape forest that stretches the entire beach, then the beach. I've spent many isolated nights on my own on these beaches from 16 to 23. There was this tree that me and my friends dubbed the Spirit Tree. It was an uprooted tree that appeared on the beach in certain months. It was up on the beach mostly in the winter months. It'd wash up when the storms came, and it'd be on the beach for a couple of weeks or a few days. It'd be right where the surf met the beach, as most trees that washed up would be in the surf. Now, what made this tree unique is that it was the same tree every time for as long as I can remember. It would also wash up in the same general area, from shower 32 to shower 44, most prominent around shower 39. My personal favorite shower, where I've experienced the strangest things in my life. I'd see it a lot while I was on serious psychedelic journeys, but other people who were sober with me would see this tree, and they always freaked out. Because on the rational side, this should not be possible, but here it was. With most of the deepest carvings remained in it, the same exact tree months later. You would drive yourself insane trying to figure it out. And around the tree, everybody would feel this vibe of deep respect, mystery, peace, love, and wonder. For some, it would elicit an overwhelming feeling of anxiety. I remember I was with this one girl when I found it one day. She didn't fully believe me, but I insisted that we leave. I was climbing all over it, hugging it, and looking at all of our old carvings. I was tripping. Eventually, reluctantly, I agreed to keep walking the beach. She later told me that at one point she felt so nervous around it that she couldn't catch her breath. I loved the spirit tree, and most of us hippies did as well. It was something that made no sense. The spirit tree showed itself to me a lot when I was in troubling times, and it always made me feel comfortable. However, every strange or quote-unquote paranormal experience I had on that beach, from UFO, ghosts, strange altered states that made no sense, and even one beach demon-like creature happened after I saw the spirit tree. Still, it never scared me. The spirit tree, anyways. This is one of the many of my strange paranormal experiences. This, however, is the most nostalgic, and thoughts of the spirit tree make me happy as I remember this almost bond that I had with it. Many nights alone after getting kicked out of my house, I'd go to the beach feeling a deep, lonely depression, just to find the spirit tree, and it would always lift my spirits. Believe this or not, but I promise you that this happens on the beaches of Markinsky and Juneau. And if you find a tree washed up on the beach one late night around shower 39 with carvings all over it, looking older than time itself, show your respect to this wonderful, amazing spirit tree, if it strikes your fancy. Don't if you don't want to. To many, it'll just be a washed-up tree, but to those of us who know, we know it like the back of our hands. And this tree is so much more. The devil lived in my shed. I've had a handful of strange happenings, but this one takes the cake as the most sinister one that I've ever experienced. I don't even like thinking about it because it still chills up my spine. So here goes nothing. When I was a kid, my mom moved from house to house a lot. We weren't really well off, so to say the least, which resulted in us staying with a lot of other people. This house, though, had some strange things that happened right off the bat. We'd hear footsteps all over the house, all hours of the day, but more often late at night. Doors would slam occasionally and drawers would open, things like that. Your typical haunted house type of deal. Being somewhat used to this at this point, because I grew up on a haunted Coast Guard base, didn't really bother me that much. It It spooked me when the doors would slam, but I wasn't really terrified. My mother was very Christian, and she would tell me not to pay any attention to these things because they just wanted to scare you. So I braved it pretty well. It always seemed like my mom and I attracted these type of things. Well, these weird things started increasing over time. I started seeing a very inhuman entity in my room. This thing with a deformed trunk got half gray or blue in color, huge eyes and a lanky demeanor, and would be seen by my bedside looking down at me. Its face was skinny and deformed, and I would see the glowing blue bubbles floating around the room when it appeared. I couldn't not be afraid at this point, and I would now be sleeping in my mother's room. But this thing would keep appearing, and I would shake my mom till she woke up. When she woke, the entity would be gone. After a while, I learned to ignore this thing when I felt the chills hit me. And when I was trying to sleep, I would just throw the blankets and the pillows underneath my head. Eventually, I would start praying, and this seemed to work after a while. Well, one day, me and my friend are in the backyard playing Marco Polo without the pool. It was kind of like hide and go seek, except you can whisper polo and you still have to stand still. Most of the time, my friend would always whisper polo. We also had this shed in the corner of the yard. It was always locked up, so never knew what was in it. I walked around, deprived of my vision, calling out Marco. No response. I call out again, and no response. I call out again, rather annoyed, because he always tried to cheat like that. I call out one last time, and I hear a faint whisper. Finally, someone decided to play fate. At least I thought. I turn around. Marco! I hear the whisper polo. I start walking toward the sound. Marco. No response. Marco! Still no response. Arms reached out, walking blindly, taking slow steps. I feel a wall. I get ready to call out again. I get cut off with a low, evil growl. Not human, not animal. Then it happened. Flashes of fire and death so gruesome I can't chalk it up to an overactive imagination. I would have to be seriously disturbed to see what I did. In the fire and death, I saw flashes of tormented faces melting and bubbling in the fire. I tried to open my eyes, but the images were still burning through. I saw hundreds of faces tormented and screaming, bodies twisted, charred, and disfigured. Screams pierced my eardrums, so blood-curdling that they drowned out my own screams. And there were growling and howls all around. It was so terrible when I came through that my friend was shaking me very rapidly. I was in a ball, holding my legs, screaming and crying. I ran into the house and told my mom. She instantly got us out of that house that day and moved to a different friend's house. We went to church all the time after the house. We went to church all the time after that, and she had a priest pray over me for weeks after that. I never experienced anything like that again, thank God. I'm glad I never went into detail about the faces, or my mom would have definitely sent me to therapy. It was haunting my dreams, and this place a few years after it happens. But even the dreams weren't as bad as what really happened. The faces I saw melted and boiled till the skin peeled away to expose the meat and bone behind it. Then that would melt into a different face, and the same thing would happen. These faces all screamed while melting in intense anguish. This was actually terrifying for me to write, guys. I honestly hope that nobody can relate to this experience. Believe in hell or don't, I know what I saw that day, and I can never forget. car crash and parallel universe. In the summer of 2017, around 2 hours after my grandfather passed away, me and my sister were in a horrific car accident. It was a bit past midnight. We were on our way to Grandpa's house. I was behind the wheel and driving moderately fast. I was supposed to make a U-turn, but the brakes failed and we hit the guardrail. The front of the car was demolished. Both of us were badly injured. I believe I lost consciousness for a few seconds. When I woke up again, I looked at her and saw blood all over her face and realized that she too had lost her consciousness. She was slowly coming on when I squeezed myself out the window and went to the other side to get her out of the car. The door was stuck just like mine, so I couldn't get her out. People started to gather around and call 911. The firefighters came and removed the door and finally brought her out of the car. When the ambulance was taking us to the hospital, I was having the longest deja vu of my entire life. I knew which hospital that we were going to, even though nobody told me, and I knew how the interior of the hospital looked like, somewhere I've never even been before. I even knew the name of the doctor who was supposed to stitch me up, someone who I've also never met before. It's weird because as soon as me and my sister were alone and could talk to each other, she told me about how she felt like she's been there before and was feeling deja vu the whole time. It might seem normal for people who suffered head trauma to experience these kind of things and read too much into something that isn't actually there, but it's a lot more weirder than it seemed like at first glance. I believe that both of us died on that timeline, but for some reason, our consciousness switched on into a parallel version of ourselves in another universe. And the constant feeling of deja vu was because of our consciousnesses settling into the bodies of our alternate selves with the original consciousnesses still present, which caused the feeling of experiencing everything twice. Now here's something truly bizarre. There was a song called Zalem by Monson Chavoshi, which our mom loved and listened to almost every single day. Even when my mom didn't play it, my older brother would. It was kind of a signature song in our home back in 2005 all the way to 2008. So a few months after the crash, I was having a conversation with one of my co-eds about music. She was without a doubt the #1 fan of Monson Chavoshi, to the point that we used to call her a chauvoshist. She was talking about her favorite Chavoshi song, and I just remembered all those years of listening to Zalem, and I said, "Yeah, he's a good singer. My mom loved Zalem. She used to play it on repeat until someone became sick of hearing it." She frowned and asked me about the song that I had just mentioned. She said that he doesn't have a song named Zalem. I thought maybe I got the name wrong, so I sang the chorus. She shook her head and said it's not a Chavoshi song. She named Farouk as the singer. I swore that the song I used to listen to was Chavoshi's. His voice is unmistakable. There's no way I'd be wrong about that. So she asked me to send her the song. Obviously, I didn't have her old computer in which the song was stored on, and I couldn't find her old Chavoshi mix CD, so I Googled it. No matter how much I looked, I couldn't find it online. I even searched by the lyrics and only found the song Zalem by Farouk. I thought maybe it's the same song and I was wrong all along. So I downloaded it and listened to it, but the song by Farouk can't be more different from what I remember. Sure, it has the same lyrics, but the melody and the genre of it's completely different. So I asked my mom about it, and guess what? She never heard of it. Neither did my brother. And my brother gave us the song in the first place. They have no recollection of that song, whether it's Chavoshi's or Farouk's. On the other hand, my sister remembers it. I sang her the chorus and she said it was a Chavoshi song. Somehow she and I have memories about a song which didn't even exist in this world. I don't know why or even how it's possible, but I sincerely believe that we moved through dimensions when we were both unconscious after that crash. I've heard stories that happened to other people which are similar to our experience. I don't want to get too much onto this one, but I think it has something to do with my grandpa's death. Maybe we were supposed to die that night, but his death caused an event which led us to moving on to another universe where we didn't die. Little kids running around in the ICU when death comes. Some of you that work in hospitals, or have loved ones that work in hospitals, or have been close to a loved one as they took their last breaths and transitioned to the great unknown, may have heard what I'm about to describe. There's a particular phenomenon that occurs to people in those last moments. And I'm talking about the appearance of kids running around their deathbed or just outside their room. This is to be differentiated to the phenomenon of close ones that have passed away visiting in days prior to their deaths. This is different. This occurs hours, if not minutes, before their deaths. I experience this with greater frequency whenever I work in the ICU unit, where people are very sick. What most patients describe as cheerful kids, running about around their beds in a playful manner, snickering or just playing. Most patients usually respond calling the nurse and asking, "Who are these kids running around and where are their parents?" and scaring the living bejesus out of them if they're new nurses. If they are experienced nurses, they know the time of the end is soon to come, and they communicate promptly with us doctors and let us know to be ready. Literature often chalks this phenomenon up to a lack of oxygen in the brain or neurochemical changes in the process of death and dying. But the pattern is very recognizable, and the experience is very similar across all cultural backgrounds and ages. Almost all hospitals have a story about these kids. And if you are entering the field of medicine, nursing, or any other health-allied profession, you will certainly hear these stories. So if you're doing rounds in the ICU at night and hear some snickering or tiny feet running in the hallways, prepare, because the call of a code green or a code red is about to sound off in the PA system. Sleep apnea and hypoxia, small window into the afterlife. As an internal medicine physician, I deal with all types of diseases and human conditions. Now, I've done this job and medicine's been my calling for more than 15 years, so I can easily say that at this point in my career, I'm able to identify patterns in patients' experiences and see some commonalities. Well, these commonalities also expand to the realm of the arcane and the realm of the unknown. There's a common experience that is, shall we say, odd in its reproducibility and parallel nature from patient to patient. I'm talking about patients coming in for restless nights, poor sleep quality, and headaches that undoubtedly get a later diagnosis of sleep apnea from me after the pertinent sleep study. Now here's the interesting part. Almost all of these patients have an issue with hyper-real dreams that can range from an astral projection type of experience, hovering above their bodies, and in some instances, encounters with family members that have sort of passed on, or encounters with beings as well. The diagnosis here is straightforward. Obstructive sleep apnea is the most common sleep-related breathing disorder. Causes you to repeatedly stop and start breathing while you sleep. There are several types of sleep apnea, but the most common is obstructive sleep apnea. This type of apnea occurs when your throat muscles intermittently relax and block your airway during sleep. A noticeable sign of obstructive sleep apnea is snoring. When you stop breathing, your oxygen level drops drastically for short periods of time, and this jerks your physiology into a panic and wakes you up to rescue you from your impending oxygenless doom. But when your oxygen is critically low, you can say that you're dangerously close to the threshold between life and death. In essence, a near-death experience on your favorite pillow. So the next time you see your loved one in a dream, you astral project or have a wildly realistic dream, you could have just had a brush with the Grim Reaper without even knowing it. A little bit about black magic practices. For context, my husband has a very short temper, but I've been working on communications with him. We get along pretty well, with banter here and there. My husband's a 45-year-old male. Let's call him S. He has very weird dreams that seem to me more like premonitions at times, but he can't even dream us some lottery numbers. Anyway, about a week ago on a Monday, he told me not to accept any food offerings from anyone and not to leave my bag unattended. I carry a haversack usually as I go to the gym during my lunch hours. I told him it's impossible to carry my bag everywhere I go, but I didn't receive any food offerings from that. Would be devastated if someone had brought me a Krispy Kreme donut only for me to refuse it. I asked him why he was giving me this specific instruction, and he told me in his dream, an unknown entity told him that someone is out to get us through me. As it's a normal occurrence, him in his dream, I took note of the request. A few days went by, uneventful of course, but on a Friday, as I didn't go to the gym on that day, I decided to change my bag from a haversack to a sling bag. I left my haversack on the floor of my room, and I'd forgotten to set it aside. My husband picked up my bag, and he's a bit OCD and can't stand a mess, and lo and behold, a condom fell out. Now, this would have easily caused a misunderstanding, except he had a dream forewarning him about something happening through me, and that condom stands in between me and getting my ass divorced and the paranormal. How did the stupid thing even get in my bag? Also, we didn't have any condoms in the household at that very moment. I wasn't home when that happened, and naturally he was a bit upset, so he stayed out of the house and told me to look at the pack when I came home. I did. I was like, meh, what is this? And told him to haul his ass up home soon. And no, I wasn't cheating. Cheating is a very tiring game. I tossed the condom aside and totally forgot about it. S, on the other hand, was determined to check the condom. It was sealed, but the contents didn't feel like a condom has been in it. He tore the pack open and the contents were hairs, sand, some red beads, and pieces of what looked like tiny fragments of a rock. I'm really not sure what spell is binded in that condom, but I think whoever that person is, it's meant to break my marriage apart. I'm adamant that it came from one of his friends, but why? Because regardless of how qualified S is, he hasn't been successful with job finding for the last 3 months. Luckily, we're a 2-income household and I was able to carry my family for the last few months. Stressful, but doable. He has this friend who constantly is checking up on his well-being, and I have a feeling that it's just to ensure that S is down on his luck and all that. That person often contacted S, and even when S replied sarcastically, that friend kept messaging him over and over on the pretext of getting him to an interview or a job. I've decided to read some prayers over and over by myself. S has just started a new job this week. Nothing significant happened to me, and whatever was trying didn't succeed.